In about 10 days, South Korea will have a new leader, which also raises hopes of a possible South Korea-U.S. summit and a solution to the lingering U.S. tariff issues. Let us discuss more with Professor Kim Hwagyun this morning. Welcome back, Professor Kim.
Thank you for the invite.
So I'd like to begin with the latest trade figures. According to the Korea Customs Service on Wednesday, exports in the first 3 weeks of May were down 2.4% on year. Professor Kim, would you say we are already being hit by tariff-related repercussions?
It is plausible that Korean exports are beginning to feel tariff-related effects, but this early decline is a bit too early, I think, and it's not definite evidence alone. So a little more rigorous analysis probably is necessary in terms of like the product and also destination, actually. But according to the historical studies or the previous studies, when the tariff imposition happens, then typically it takes about 2 to 4 quarters to have a full effect. So in that sense, this really early May effect is a little just premature in some sense, but clearly there's some expectations channel that, like, for instance, like in case of the automobiles,
right.
I know that like lots of the dealers actually started buying the Korean cars earlier to mitigate this effect, and maybe in May they don't actually decide to buy more, so maybe that actually is reflected. So I think it's going to be like a combination of both full effects and the expectations effects. So I think we have to look and see, but clearly the Korea probably has to prepare for some of these main effects given this the number.
So we don't need to be all or too dramatic about it, but still it could be a clue to what to expect in the coming weeks or months. Now, the second round of trade negotiations between South Korea and the U.S. were more timely than ever with the whole latest figures now. Do you think the U.S. proposed what it really wants at the talks this time, or do we know what they want already?
I mean, there's always some strategic ambiguity here posed by the U.S. government, obviously. But then, while some objectives are well known, like the trade imbalance, that seems to be like very universal across countries that the U.S. is dealing with. And there are some other things. And we also know that the main target for this tariff is definitely China. So I think the origin of like these products or services, or whether China is trying to bypass like through the Korea and some other countries in terms of selling their products, I think. So these are the clear motivations. And also probably, I don't know to what extent it is the case, but the U.S. definitely tries to mitigate the degree of this fiscal deficits, and then the tariff actually is probably like used as like some tax revenue, obviously, collecting from the foreign firms, basically. So I think all these kind of things, some combinations. What we don't know is like percentage. So to what extent I think it is about just fixing the trade surplus, or it's going to be more about the tariff revenue. We don't know.
Certainly. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Professor Kim. I feel like there's no reason for the U.S. or South Korea to, rush through the whole trade negotiation, since we will have a new government soon after the election.
Yeah, so I think I don't think neither side actually, I think that neither side has strong incentive to rush. And we already kind of saw some UK deal and then some preliminary China deal. So it's going to be given as like some range. There could be some slight changes, but I think we know that the South Korea is going to be probably somewhere in between, hopefully more kind of closer to the UK side.
Right.
But we don't know yet. But I think in terms of the speed, I don't think the U.S. also is like really rushing. They want to have some big picture agreed, but they know also that once the election's over, then the new government, actually the administration team, is going to start negotiating. So if they make too much hasty decisions, and then if the new government is going to just, to flip everything, that's going to be super costly in terms of both reputation and also actual, the time and efforts.
Indeed.
So I think both will try to kind of, the time the market, I think, the deal a bit.
Well, what we do know is that South Korea will have a new leader in about 11 days, But do you think a summit between the leaders of the new South Korean leader and Trump be, any help in resolving the trade issues, or no? What do you think?
I think so. I mean, I don't think this big summit, meeting is going to handle all the details. But, the big picture agreement is important so that, the practitioners and also the officials actually get into actual negotiation in terms of like details, which is more important. So big picture agreement wise, I think summit meet work actually can be very important in that regard. At least the one part of the uncertainty is going to be resolved. So I think after election, if the new leader in South Korea, the new president is going to deal with President Trump, I think that's definitely going to resolve the uncertainty, at least in terms of like the big picture.
But neither South Korea nor the U.S. wants to pass the July 31st, that's when the 90-day tariff pause expires, right? They do want to make, settle things down before then, right?
Yeah, I think so. But at least the thing is, if we all like say, oh, this is going to be the hard deadline, and then I think there's a chance that the U.S. may just flip later. Well,
Right.
especially if this is not in their full favor. If it is actually going to be a good deal, then of course they will try to use it. So I think from the South Korean government's point of view, I think that's July 31st as the hard deadline, and then try to get into that actually, and then do the best actually negotiation. Probably that's the best optimal strategy. But if somehow the U.S. actually wants to delay it because of the other countries, because it's like, U.S. has to deal with like multiple countries at the same time.
Right.
So South Korea's government's the attitude versus the U.S. government's actually attitude probably may be asymmetric. But at least for the South Korean perspective, I think it's probably a good idea to, give this as like hard deadline, do their best actually.
All right, Professor Kim, thank you so much for connecting with us this morning. You have a wonderful day there.
Always pleasure.